Oh, bloody hell. Shit. Jesus, where's Steve? Seven. Right, where's Steve? There's Steve. I've met. Steve.
Hello, matey.
Hey, it all works. I can hear you and see you. Ah, I've nearly pulled my headset off. Shit. How are you, sir? You well?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, yourself?
Yeah, good actually. Just trying to eat chips in between.
Yeah. Go on, cat. Out you go.
So you're all working?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Do you want to try sharing your screen just before we admit?
Yeah. Okay. So share screen. Ask me which screen. So let's do that one there, for example. So.
Oh, look at that! Perfect.
Let me just check. I can change slides. Yeah.
That works, Steve. That's brilliant.
There we go. Right. I'll stop sharing that for the minute.
Yeah. So we've got 11, 13 people at the moment.
Queuing up. Oh, fantastic! That's good.
Yeah. So yeah, we should have a good session. And actually, we'll just play it by ear. To be honest, I mean, it's not like too much of a formal presentation thing, but I think when.
Yeah, not at all. I've written down a few reminders of things to talk about anyway, and so I've got basically what I've got there is pretty much the same set of slides that I used at R2 UK.
Okay.
And I've got a system there ready to sort of demo. Oh,
brilliant! Perfect.
So I'll figure out an angle as best I can to sort of show people what's going on as we go through it.
That's superb.
Yeah, but all good.
Right, so I think, where's Steve Moore?
I should just change one of those lights.
Right, I don't know what difference it is, but I'll put you as co-host. It makes it easier probably to be able to
maybe
see you on the list anyway. Right, should we admit everybody in?
Go for it.
Okay. Oh, there we go. The world gets populated with people.
As if by magic, people appeared and left.
Hello, Michael.
Hello. How are we doing?
Good.
Hello.
Awesome.
Right. We'll just give it. I think we've got 15 at the moment, which is a good turnout. Everybody well?
Hello.
Hey.
Varying yourself.
Yeah, good. So many familiar names and familiar faces again.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's Andrew. Hello. Trevor.
Greetings all.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so we can get started. I think really. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room just to make sure if anybody else comes in, we can push them in. So this is the first one of these sessions that we've run. So it's not kind of a interview or a presentation as such. It's really just sharing a little bit about the Padawan 360. We've got the fantastic Steve with us, who's built quite a few of these and can share quite a little bit about how they actually work. But really, the whole session is for you guys to ask questions, throw ideas, solve each other. Solve any problems that anybody's got, etc. So we'll see how it all sort of comes out, really.
That's hitting him on purpose, Mira.
No, it isn't. He was trying to set a timer.
And you hit him.
And we've got small builders as well.
We even did it.
I think Derek's just found the mute button. There you go.
Small
Oh,
builders.
there we go. Yeah. Okay, so I think probably some of you may well have seen Steve on the forums on the Facebook groups, but I'll introduce you to the wonderful Steve. Steve, do you want to give a little bit of a background?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Steve Baudains. I've been around the builders community for a few years, about 5 years or so now, I guess. Back in the day, I was a member of the Yahoo groups. So that is going back quite a long time, but I didn't realize just how big a deal building an R2 was back in those sorts of days. So I kind of left it alone for quite a long time, and then sort of came back to it a few years later when I sort of started doing trooping, and I've got a TK suit from Return of the Jedi. So I did that for a couple of years, and I always wanted to buy an R2, or not buy. Well, at that point, I thought you could just go and buy an R2 as a kit form. Of course, found out you couldn't. So one evening on the Red Stag, I think some of you know I do like a tipple every now and then. I bought a granite earth dome from America about midnight, and I was feeling tired and emotional. So I spanked quite a lot of money on a granite earth aluminium dome and CNC radar eye and the Lazy Susan bearing. And of course, when those turned up, I thought, well, that's it. I've got to do something now. So what I did last year at UKR2, for those of you outside of the UK, we have an annual sort of meetup. Well, we've only done it for the last 2 years, but we have a meetup of builders, and you know, there's various sort of presentations and things. And I volunteered and then was asked to do a presentation about Padawan. So I put some slides and things together, which I'll run through kind of quickly with you guys tonight. I don't want to spend too much time doing death by PowerPoint because I know that's a little bit dull. So let me just fire up my PowerPoint slides, and hopefully you can still all be able to hear me. Where's my slideshow gone? There it is. Okay, hopefully, Michael, can everyone see that?
I can see it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So stuff you need to know. So say my name is Steve Baudains. I live in a place called Jersey, not to be confused with New Jersey. This is the original one. Say astromech.net since 2015. I own a small business called Imperial Light and Magic, where I make and sell sound and light systems, mostly for cosplayers and props, things like that. I also work in the entertainment industry for a production company, and I also make stuff for escape rooms. So that's what I do. That's me and my droid. As I say, it's an aluminium dome, aluminium skins, mic center wooden frame, center legs, and yeah, that's about it. So when I was looking around for a control system for it, I've come from an RC background. I have been a professional drone pilot. I was the first one licensed in the Channel Islands. And I've been around radio control stuff for many, many years. So that was kind of my initial kind of go-to. But I quickly discovered that there was a lot of stuff I wanted to do with the control of my R2 that I couldn't really do with a radio transmitter, you know, like something like a DX6i, or, you know, the Futaba equivalent, or FlySky, or whatever. And I couldn't kind of control sounds and, you know, that sort of stuff, which is something I really wanted to do. So I started looking around, and I found this thing called Padawan 360. Now, I had a spare Xbox 360, couple of controllers. I'd never used it. I didn't use it anymore. So I found this this Arduino stuff, and at the time I had never even heard of an Arduino, so I didn't even know what it was all about. So I literally started from scratch. Found this stuff by a guy called Dan Kraus, lovely guy. Might be worth taking a copy of the website address that's appearing at the bottom of your screen there, github.com/dankraus/Padawan360. So Padawan is great, but it does have pros and cons. The pros are it's comparatively cheap. It's readily available. You can still buy all the control stuff brand new off the shelf, no problem at all. The biggest selling point for me is the fact that it's an ergonomic controller, and it's very, very discreet, and everything is on one controller. You can control, you know, an awful lot of stuff just through different sort of combinations of keys and things. It's also quite configurable as well, you know, if you want to sort of start delving into it. There are some cons. It can be a little bit confusing to newcomers, especially if you've got no sort of programming or Arduino kind of background or microcontroller sort of background whatsoever. It can be a little bit confusing, but believe me, that goes away very, very quickly indeed. Right now, Padawan 360 is clearable to Tier 1 only. Now, again, if you're outside of the UK and you're not sure what Tier 1 and Tier 2 means, in the UK, we have a system of controlling what events droids can attend, for want of a better description. So Tier 1, you can attend sort of Comic-Cons and pretty much anything else that the club says is okay for you to attend, and you'll be covered by the club's insurance. Tier 2 is for actual licensed events, if you like. So if Disney wanted you to do a red carpet event, for example, then that would require Tier 2 clearance. And as I say, Tier 2 at the moment, because of the amount of radio traffic noise in like on a film set, for example, where a Tier 2 droid may be required, you have to have actual radio control, so the likes of Spectrum, Futaba, etc. One of the other cons, it's not perfect. There's still there's one bug in it I'm aware of, which I will point out to you as we go through the code. You know, it's not everything to every person. So let's talk about the hardware. First off, you need a microcontroller, something like an Arduino Uno or a Mega. These are very, very cheap these days. You can pick 2 of them up for £10, you know, probably about $12, $15 or so. So they're very, very cheap. You need something called a USB shield. That's a piece of equipment that plugs in to the Arduino. It just basically sort of piggybacks on top. I'll show you that in a minute. I personally recommend the keys ones. I've used a few of these and I've never had any problems at all. You need an Xbox 360 USB receiver. So these are traditionally sold as a PC receiver for the Xbox controller. So if you wanted to play games on your PC, but you wanted to use a controller, then that would be a way of doing it. They're not too pricey, sort of £15, £20. You obviously need a Xbox 360 wireless controller. You need something to control the dome motor, and most of the time people go for the Siren 10. You also need something to control your drive motors, and the go-to one for that for most people is the Sabertooth 2x32. If you want some servos and things, that's entirely up to you. And if you want some sounds, which you know, most people obviously will do, you're going to need something called the SparkFun MP3 trigger and a micro SD card. Now, you may, I'll sort of preempt one question straight away, and that's, do I have to use those particular things because they're quite expensive, particularly the SparkFun MP3 trigger. For what it is, you can, you know, it's very expensive. It's about sort of 35 to 40 UK pounds, and you can buy a serial USB trigger for sort of like, you know, a couple of pounds these days. The issue with it is, and the same goes for the speed controllers for both the dome and for the feet, is that all of the libraries and everything that's pre-written for you as part of the Arduino code is written with these particular things in mind. Now, there's absolutely nothing to stop you rewriting the code if you wish to save some money and put in a cheaper MP3 player, for example. Absolutely no problem at all with that. But that's going to be up to you. You know, your value of your time is spent either rewriting that code or just going out and buying the one that's already supported. So, you know, you pay your money, you take your choice. You're also going to need an amplifier and speakers, some way of sort of making those sounds come out to the open world. As far as software is concerned, if you haven't already got it, hello?
Sorry, the hardware list, Sam, we got typed in questions as well, but the hardware list, is it same for the PS3 controller?
No, okay, so PS3 is a system called Shadow. We're talking about an Xbox 360, hence the name Padawan 360. This is very specifically to do with Xbox controllers.
I'll chime in and say it is the same exact hardware aside from the Bluetooth receiver and the controller, though. Yep. The wiring's a little bit differently, but like everything else is the same.
From a hardware perspective, absolutely right. Yes, that's right. However, from a software perspective, then yeah, we're going to be using the Sketch, which I'm going to sort of, forgive me, but I'm going to treat people on this chat as if they've got no idea about any of this sort of stuff. But you have a piece of software called the Arduino IDE, and that's kind of your interface, if you like, your window to talk to your Arduino hardware. You're going to need something called drive sort, and I'm going to come on to that and the reasons why you need that a bit later on. You're obviously going to need some MP3 sound files, the sketch itself. So the sketch is the Arduino program, for want of a better description. And you're going to need something called libraries. Now, this is where the major difference is going to be, because if you have a look at the list of these libraries, we're including things like the Xbox receiver. So this is where this particular sketch is written specifically for the Xbox receiver. And as we go through the sketch, you'll see there's various calls to sort of see if a particular button or a button combination is being pressed. And it'll say things like, you know, Xbox L1 button or something along those lines. So having said that, let's go and take a look at the sketch. So let me just get my other window up. Bear with me one sec. Here we go. Let's try and... Okay, so hopefully you guys can now see I've got a different window up, and it looks like it's got lots of sort of slashes and commas and all those sorts of good things in it. This is the Arduino IDE program. And as I say, if you've never used this before, just go to the Arduino website and download a copy of this IDE program. You'll be using it all the time. This is the program that allows you to upload sketches onto your Arduino. Now, again, for complete novices, just want to make a couple of things clear. One is that your interface to your hardware, so to your Arduino board, is it's a bit of a one-way chat. So if you upload a program to your Arduino, you can't then pull it back off your Arduino. So if someone, for example, gave you an Arduino preloaded with a program and you think, oh, that does exactly what I want, I really want a copy of it, tough. You can't pull that program back off. Once you push your code up to it, it's sat there and it'll run forever. It won't get lost when you turn the power off or anything like that. It's written into the memory, so it always runs. But if you need to make a small change to that program, you basically overwrite the whole thing, re-upload the entire program. Okay, we're actually about halfway down through the sketch itself, so I'm going to scoot back up to the top. One of the regular questions I get is, what hardware do I need? Now, the easy answer to that is have a look at the sketch. So you'll see in the actual sketch itself, there is a list of hardware listed right there, and even a couple of suggestions of where to get your stuff from. Obviously, depending on where you are in the world, just source things however you can, sort of local to you. There's two variants of the Arduino Padawan 360 sketch. There's a version for Uno and there's a version for the Mega. Now, functionally, they're pretty much the same. However, the major difference is that the Mega has a lot more available serial channels so that you can interface with other parts of your droid. So, for example, if you want to interface with a set of Arduino in the dome or something along those lines, and you want to talk to maybe you want to outsource some other functionality to another Arduino somewhere else in your droid, maybe to control, I don't know, a fire extinguisher or arms that open, or whatever else you may want to do, servos that open, then the Mega is probably going to be the better version, because that's got more channels available to talk to other Arduinos and offload code to them, offload instructions to them. What I want to do tonight is to just basically take you through a very simple variation, or the simplest build you can do, basically. So we're going to be using an Arduino Uno for this. I've actually got one completely set up, so we'll have a look at that in a couple of minutes. I don't want to get too much into advanced stuff tonight. Really just to kind of give a flavor for what this kind of how simple you can basically get one of these things up and running, because it really is not rocket science. So the nice thing about the way that this sketch is written, and a sketch is the Arduino sort of term for a program, is that it actually reads in pretty much decent English. It kind of makes sense when you start looking at it. So say, for example, here, Dan has very kindly put a load of comments in to sort of help you out. So you can see here, this particular section says set speed and turn speeds here. So if we have a look at these different values here, you can see that drive speed 1 has got a value of 50, and he even says, set these 3 speeds to whatever you want. So for beginners, 50 to 75 seems to work. And then drive speed 2 is 100, and drive speed 3 is 127, which is the maximum value. We will go through this, but what that basically allows you to do on the Xbox controller is select how fast your droid is going to go. So I, for example, on my own personal droid, if I'm on a carpeted surface, I have problems getting it rolling on speed 1. So I'll quickly dial it up to maybe to speed 3, just enough to sort of break that that surface tension, if you like, on carpet and get it actually rolling. But you can get sort of wheel spin problems on hard surfaces and stuff like that, in which case dial it back down to speed 1. And it's as simple as clicking a button. I'll take you through all that when we get to it. Likewise, you can adjust how fast your droid turns on the spot. So this is like full left or full right on the drive stick. So in this case, yeah, we've got it set at 70. You can set it to pretty much whatever you want, anywhere between those values again. Now, this is a piece of code. This next piece of code is something I suggested to Dan because I've come from a gaming sort of background, console gaming and whatever else. And the original code was set that your right thumb would control the droid's movement and the left thumb would control the dome rotation. Now, for me, that felt completely opposite to what felt natural to me, because being a gamer, your movement is all on the left stick. So I made some changes to my code to make it left-hand drive, as I refer to it. I fed that back to Dan. Dan came up with a nicer way of doing it. Now, the default now is left-hand drive. So on that feedback, he's basically rewritten this. So the default is going to be left-hand drive. Hopefully, I would imagine it feels more natural to most people. However, if you wish to change that, what Dan has very kindly done is he's put in a line of text here that says, is left stick drive, which basically is saying, is this a left-hand drive build? Do you want it to be left-hand drive? And this is set to true at the moment. If you wish to be right-hand drive, so use the right thumbstick, then basically just set that to false, and and then re-upload the sketch, and then magically just everything sort of swaps over. So yeah, it's a nice, easy way of reading through this sort of stuff. Depending on the gearing on your dome motor and how big a motor you've got, what sort of speed it runs at, you can also alter the dome speed variables, which basically, again, this is your maximum speed. Now, what I should have also perhaps pointed out is that everything is controllable with the movement of the stick. So if you move the stick just a little bit, the dome will rotate just very slowly, or the droid will drive forward very slowly. So it's all like a linear sort of scale to how much you move the actual stick. But if you wish to change your dome speed, maybe your gearing is just too low and it's just never going to go around particularly quickly, up the value on this and it will effectively pump more volts out of the other end when it gets to it. Ramping is something you can also set on here, which basically is like a softening, if you like, of how hard the power kicks in. When you go full stick, you won't really notice it particularly much, but that's something you can also play around with. If you find that you've got a problem with the thumbsticks on your controller and maybe it's picking up signals when the thumbs are at neutral, then you can also increase the value of this, what's called dead zone. And you've got a dome dead zone range on the top here and a drive dead zone range on the bottom. So if you find that your droid is wandering off when your thumbs are off the sticks, increase these values, re-upload the sketch, and that hopefully will sort that out for you. Okay, one gotcha. There's one gotcha I'm going to point out here, and this is this line right here. Highlight all that. So, as I mentioned, the Padawan sketch talks to certainly your Siren 10, which is going to be your dome controller, using something called serial, packetized serial. By default, when you download the sketch off Dan's GitHub page, the baud rate, which is a method of communication that your Arduino talks to your speed controller, is set to 2400. Now, that won't work with the pin settings that you need to set on your Siren 10. So you need to set it to 9600, or else your dome controller will not work. So do make sure you set that to 96. And in fact, he even says it in his comments. He says for simple serial, which is what we're going to be using, we're using simple serial, use 9600. Cool. Let's scroll on down a bit. So there's our libraries being included up there. Now, This next section here basically tells the Arduino on what pins to expect the different pieces of equipment. So ST serial, which is the saber tooth, so that's your drive motors, is set to pin 4. Now, if you're using the Mega version, obviously you need to have a look, but the Mega works slightly differently. Instead of it being on a specified numbered pin, it uses a number of the serial connections, which are in a slightly different section on the Mega. The Mega is a much bigger sort of board. I can show you one of those in a minute if anyone's got any questions. But anyway, going back to the Uno, so the saber tooth is on pin 4, and the siren, which is your dome control motor, is on pin 5. So that's what that number 5 there is.
Steve, what's that not a pin? What's not a pin? Is that because it's purely transmitting and not receiving?
Yeah, I think it was required to be specified for the software serial thing. I think you had to say 2 values as part of that variable.
Okay.
And the second one is actually where that pin is going to.
Got you.
So again, like pin 2, which is there, we never use. We don't use that.
Yeah, I think they receive and transmit. So I'm assuming this is purely just.
Yeah, I would guess it's the same.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's no need for us to ever receive a signal back from the speed controllers. Then they're not going to tell us anything we don't already know, because we're the ones telling it what to do, not the other way around.
Got it.
Okay, so let's have a little scroll down. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to set up some variables, and one is to do with the volume. So basically it tells us what volume to preset the SparkFun MP3 board, and you can see it's got a value of 20. Now what that means, and that's where 0 is full volume and 255 is silent. So a value of 20 basically gives us 20 points worth of headway to increase the volume over what we've set our amplifier to be. So obviously you've got an amplifier separate to your SparkFun board. So your SparkFun board goes into your amplifier. You set your amplifier before the start of an event or whatever it is, but this still gives you 20 clicks worth of headway to go louder if you want. And obviously you can also turn the volume down. You can do all this through your remote control as well. Like I say, it's little things like being able to remotely adjust the volume, which completely sold the system for me. And it's worked wonders, because you get a little girl perhaps come up and give R2 a hug. The last thing you want to be doing is going woo 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 woo, like 300 decibels right in her left lug hole, because the parents get a bit upset about things like that. So you can remotely turn the volume down on your Droid. Absolutely phenomenal. Okay, I'm going to sort of just skip down a little bit. Some of the other stuff here is basically just saying about how long it takes to attach if your controller gets turned off, for example, how quickly it attempts to reattach, things like that. And it sets up a load of variables basically saying that the default values for your stick positions are going to be 0. So you must obviously make sure your sticks are in the center position before you connect up. Right, let's scroll down a bit. We then tell our MP3 trigger to start up. We tell our USB to start up, and we say Xbox receiver to start up as well. We tell the Siren 10 that we're going to be talking to it over whatever our dome baud rate was set, and as I mentioned, we can set that to 9600. And scroll down a little bit. You can see that the saber tooth actually is set. It's kind of hard configured to be 9600 as well. So that's set there. Let's scroll down a bit. Now, Dan has been playing around with having servo connections attached to his thing as well, and he called it extinguisher pin because he was going to get it to try and fire a fire extinguisher. So basically, these bits here are basically setting that servo up. He's called it extinguisher pin and declared it as an output, and by default, he's written that value to be high, which means the servo is in one position rather than another. In fact, it might have been a relay. I beg your pardon. I think he was using a relay to do that, or a solenoid. Much the same thing anyway. So we set our MP3 trigger volume up, and here it says, are we in left-hand stick drive mode? In which case, put these values in here. Otherwise, we put the right hand equivalent value in. So this is where that that change of whether or not we set it to be right hand or left hand drive actually kicks in. Okay, let's erase down a bit, and then basically what happens is we then try to actually connect to the Xbox controller. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to break away from that and stop sharing the screen and actually give you a quick demo using a wing and a prayer and a bit of live video. So let's hope this all works. And so what I've got down here is a basically Padawan 360 on a board. There's not a massive amount to it, as you can see. So I'll give you a quick guided tour. Hopefully you can all see what's going on. Let me try and get that at an angle where I can see it as well. So this here is the Sabertooth 32 controller. So it's 232 amp speed controllers that act as one. This over here is the Siren 10. That's your dome controller. This is the SparkFun MP3 board, this red one. Here we have the Arduino Uno at the bottom and the keys USB shield on the top. And as you can see, that's what gives you a USB out. And over here, we have the Xbox 360 receiver. Just for the sake of this demo for tonight, out of the MP3 player, I'm just going into an amplified speaker. This is an Acre, but typically this would go out to an actual amplifier, and then the amplifier connects to your own speaker. So I'll just turn that on a little bit. For the sake of demo purposes, I've got an old windscreen wiper motor over there, which is going to act as our dome motor. I'm going to use my egg droid for the feet motors. For now, let's see if I can get that at an angle about there. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to plug it in. Actually, let me just connect the feet motors up first.
Is that a 32? That Steve, that Saber 2.
Yes, this is a 2x32.
Right.
A lot of people would say, well, surely a 25 is good enough, and yeah, it probably is. But the 32 is like a couple of pounds or a couple of dollars more than the 25. It really doesn't make any sense, and it has got a lot more features, so you can actually do a lot more with it. Okay. So right, what we're going to do now is we're going to connect power up. Now, normally you would go perhaps through a fuse. And what you should find is nothing happens because I haven't powered up the controller. So this is your this is how you want your droid to be. So you can basically leave your droid powered on, and so long as your controller is off, nothing happens, nothing moves. It's all sort of locked into place. And also on this one, you can probably see I put a little voltmeter on there. I don't know if that's the right way around on your video. It looks a bit reversed on mine. Let me put that up there.
That's good.
There we go. That's better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the middle button, which powers this on. And hopefully there, I don't know if you heard that, if it was loud enough, but I had an audio confirmation that we've now connected, and you can see that the ring is spinning around on here, which tells me I am connected to the droid. So at this point, when that is spinning around, I do not have control over the drive motors. So if I move the drive stick, and again, apologies if this is reversed on your video, but that's my left thumb, nothing happens. But I do have control over the drive motor.
It's the correct orientation for us, Steve. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, it's just flipped on my screen. That's great. At this point, I also do have control over audio. Now, one of the beauties about this sketch is that you can customize this in such a way that your sounds can be configured to pretty much do whatever you want. So by default, for example, on the blue button, if you don't push anything else, just the blue button, it will cycle randomly through a number of different sounds, and they tend to be what we call sad sounds. So like that. And but you can hear each time I'm pressing that, I'm getting I am actually getting potentially a different sound. It is truly randomized. It's just picking from a list. So, it's great that you can just very easily have this one hand behind your back and just push, that sort of button. If someone's a little unsure coming up to your droid, you can sort of make sounds like that, and they, maybe then they'll approach. And then consequently on the other buttons, you can preload other sounds like happy sounds or whatever. and all those sorts of good things. Now, where this system really starts to come into its own is the fact that, as well as just pushing those 4 buttons, you've also got combo buttons. So if I now, for example, hold this shoulder button, the left shoulder button, and push the blue button, I get a completely different thing. Hopefully you can hear that. I'm getting in this case, the layer message. If I hold the left trigger and push blue, I get the wolf whistle. And these ones are one-hit ones. So basically, every time, if I want to play a specific sound, I can do that by holding that trigger, pushing that. That's not selecting from a random list. And this is all in the sketch. It's very, very easy to find. You can basically look all of this up in the sketch. If I wish to change the volume remotely, for example, I push and keep my finger on the right hat button, and then I go up to increase the volume on the D-pad, or down to decrease the volume, and that will actually decrease and change the volume output from the smartphone MP3 player. Really, really, really helpful. Okay, so let's go back. We've been talking about that little ring spinning round, which tells me that I cannot control the drive motors. In order to do that, I have to push the start button, and when I do that, the first segment lights up, and I also get an audio confirmation. And now if I push forwards, I've got control over the drives. Okay, now the fact that that is the first segment is telling me I'm selected in speed 1. Now I mentioned that there's got 3 different selectable speeds as part of the sketch. So that's speed 1. If I want to go to speed 2, I click down. So I basically click that button in. I'm now speed 2, so if I go forwards, backwards, you can hear that that's now running at a much faster speed, but you can still control it. You know, it's very good for sort of controlling low speed stuff. You know, turn left or turn right. And then if I want to go to top speed, I click it down a 3rd time, and I get an audio confirmation that the droid is now in top speed, and those drives are going as fast as they possibly can. If I want to go back to speed 1, I just click it down again, and we kind of cycle around. We keep going around in circles on that. So really, really, really useful little system. The other good thing about Padawan is it is fail-safe, which is an absolutely critical and crucial part of any droid build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forwards on the drive sticks, and then I'm going to pull the battery out of the back of the controller. So we're going forwards, and I'm going to pull the battery out in 3, 2, 1, and you see that it's immediately stopped. Okay, so it's not getting any spurious signals. All of this is still switched on, but the drive immediately stopped as soon as power was cut from the transmitter. So if I put the batteries back in, turn it back on, okay, that actually did pick something up there, which is one of the bugs that I need to get sorted out, where it did actually just start driving again. Anyway, let's, what should we look at next? So we've looked at the dome. Oh yes, so the other thing this has got is what I call attract mode. It's actually called automation mode, and that's if you push the back button, what it will do is it will randomly, the controller must stay switched on. At any time the controller is switched off, then the unit fails safe, so everything stops. The dome will stop, the sounds will stop. But when it's in automation mode, you'll notice that I'm not pushing any buttons, but it will still make random sounds every sort of, I think it's between 5 and 20 seconds or so I've got set. And the dome will also move randomly as well between 5 and, there we go, you just saw that move all on its own. So randomly every 5 to 20 seconds, it'll make either a sound, or it'll move the dome, or maybe a combination of both. There we go. To take it out of automation mode, again, you just push on the back button. So really, really, really very ergonomic and quite clever control system for a droid. Personally, I either walk around with this behind my back, or I've actually got like a black backpack, a very, very very thin, cheap sort of backpack from like a dollar store, pound shop sort of place, and I actually put it in front of me, and I wear it sort of almost like a I don't know, well, it's a backpack on the front. I don't know what the correct, papoose or something. And I put the controller in there and just put my hands through the sides, control the droid. And there's been numerous times where people have said to me, "Oh, who's controlling that? And I've kind of gone, oh, no idea, you know, take my hands out of the bag, and no one even knows that it's actually you controlling it. So very, very good. Distance as well is pretty damn good. I've certainly had this under control further away than I'd feel comfortable of being away from my droid, if you see what I mean. Certainly, again, like I say, you're not going to be using this on a film set because this is not cleared for tier 2 level because it is, at the end of the day, using Microsoft's proprietary 2.4 gig to connect. It's not using Bluetooth. It's not a Bluetooth controller. If anyone thinks it's Bluetooth, it is not. But what it is doing is it can get flooded potentially. It's not as secure as perhaps the likes of Spectrum and people like that. So great little system. Now, there's one bug which Dan is aware of. I actually spoke to him about it today, and that is that if you are driving, so I'll put it back into drive, and you also have it in automate mode at the same time, there is a glitch every now and then where if you just time it just right, just like I've done there, the dome will carry, the drive will carry on going if the dome had just gone through its automation thing until you next move the stick. So it's not kind of resetting that value. Dan is aware of that. So what we recommend is that if you are going to be driving your droid, you take it out of that automate mode. So you just manually control the dome or the sounds if you're driving, and you only use the automate mode for if you're sitting there statically somewhere and just attracting people to his magnificence. Okay, so that is what I wanted to show you in terms of practical demonstration. Now, one of the things I mentioned is that let me get that a bit better there. So the SparkFun MP3 player has got a little feature to it, and it's not just the SparkFun. Just about any serial MP3 player has got the same issue. Excuse me, and that's that if you wish to change any of the sounds on it, change perhaps the order, or if you don't like the layer message, or you get a better copy of something, let's say, or you don't like the Cantina music and you want to replace it with something else. The thing with MP3 files and MP3 players is the MP3 player doesn't really care what you've called that file. So what we normally have, let me get another share up here. Okay, so so in this particular window here, you can see I've got 53 odd files, and they all are numbered as numbered beginning at 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, etc. And then there's some sort of description of to what that actual file is. So say, for example, I didn't like the Cantina music and I wish to change that for something else. Now, what happens is when you copy the files onto the micro SD card, your computer will copy those files even though the date and timestamp on the actual file itself won't change. What will happen is that file will become the latest file on the memory card. And what that will do is it will effectively throw the order of all those files out, because your MP3 player, SparkFun or whichever kind you get, is expecting those files to have been written onto the disk in a particular order. And by disk, I mean the micro SD card. So it's expecting them to be in a particular order. So there's two ways around that. The first way is by manually copying every file one by one in the order they appear. So you start at 01, you drag it and put it across, or copy and paste. Then you go to 02, drag it, put it across. And that's going to become A, very, very tedious very quickly. And B, if you make any single mistake, that's it. The whole order is gone, and you won't be able to recover it. You'll have to basically format the card and start again. However, there is a lovely little utility that fixes all this for you, and it's called Drive Sort. So let me go and find a copy of Drive Sort. So I would heartily recommend, if you're new to this, go and find this utility. Okay, it's called Drive Sort, freely downloadable on the interwebs. Go and grab yourself a copy. It will save you hours and hours of frustration. Now, what Drive Sort does is it's actually very, very simple. It will take an external memory card. So in this case, I'm going to insert a card into my E drive. Can you see, I don't suppose, can you see drive sort, or are you still seeing my
I'm just seeing the
file
folder
manager?
at the moment.
Sorry, okay, I need to share drive sort there with me.
Yeah, got it.
Cool. Okay, so what drive sort looks like is it looks a little bit like a file manager sort of program. But what you do is you have to open a disk first of all, and as I say, it's treating a memory card as a disk. So by default, it actually picks up the external disk, which in this case is my E drive. If I say OK to that, that's now showing me all of the files on that particular card. Now, I sort of preempted this a little bit. I've fudged this a little bit. So what I did is I actually changed file number 10, so which was the Cantina music. And you can see now that 10 does not appear in order, if you see what I mean. So if I actually scroll to the bottom of my list, I've now got 10 Cantina right at the very bottom. So what that means is that every single file will be in the wrong place by 1, if you see what I mean. So the whole lot will is shifted out of order by 1 once it gets past file number 9. So what we need to do is very, very simple. So we use this utility. We simply click on the third button in from the left, which says sort current folder. Now, if I do that, keep your eyes on where 9 and 11 are at the moment. Okay, keep your eyes sort of around there. So I'm going to hit sort right about now. And you'll see now that 10 has magically appeared in between 9 and 11. So that's now sorted the order magically. It's fudged the order basically in which any other device reads that. So what we have to do now is we have to save that back to the disk. Okay, so we're now going to click save current folder. That's now written that back to the disk. And then finally we click on close the disk. And that now allows me to actually eject the disk, and the files will now be written into the correct order. So anytime you make a change, this baffled me for ages, well before even Droid building. I was using serial MP3 players to build E11 blasters and things like that. And you'd change one file and the whole lot would go out and it just wouldn't work. So it was really, really confusing. So that's how you fix that problem, is to go to drive sort basically. Okay, let me have a quick look at my notes and tell you what else we may have missed. Oh yeah, one other thing as well to bear in mind if you're using the Arduino IDE program, if you're doing some 3D printing stuff at the same time, for example, or you happen to have Cura open, and this is just me choosing Cura because that's what I use, close Cura because Cura can interrupt the port, like your COM port or whatever else that you're trying to talk to your Arduino on. So quite often, if you're having trouble writing to your Arduino, if it says it can't connect, for example, then chances are either something else is taking over the port, or you haven't got the port or the correct Arduino type selected in the IDE program. So let me once again go back and share the sketch. Hopefully you can see that. So if you are, again, unfamiliar with how the Arduino program works, the easiest way to set this up is to go to Tools at the top, and you can see you've got a board, which basically saying what kind of Arduino have you got. Well, I was using an Arduino Uno. If, for example, you're using a Nano, then you'd select Nano here. If you're using a Mega, then you'd select Mega here. Simple as that. And what that will do is that it'll actually just check your sketch for you very quickly first. So I'm actually going to change that back up to Uno. Okay, and then it's simply a case of verifying your code, which you can do with the tick button there. I've just got some spurious folders, and it will just take a few seconds to do that. And you'll get a little sort of green progress bar along the bottom right-hand corner, and it now says done compiling. And then if I was connected to my Arduino, which I'm not at the moment, I'd then just click upload, and it pushes the program up onto your actual Arduino. So really, it's a great little system. As I say, it's not perfect. Don't get me wrong; it is absolutely not perfect. But for relatively simple use, so being able to drive your droid around, being able to turn the dome wherever you want, being able to make sounds on demand of whichever sound you want, and you've got with all the different sort of combinations you can do, you've got what, 4, 8, 12, and then so you've got 12 individually selectable on-demand files, so you can repeat that every time you want. And then you've got another 4 lots of combinations of sound, or sort of packets of different sounds. So yeah, you can literally control 50. I think we've got 53 odd files loaded on this particular system. If you're building another kind of droid, I know that Rob Howdell, I've been helping Rob out with some Padawan stuff for his T3 build. I think he's up to the 100 and something odd files on his by basically tweaking different combos. So again, what Rob's doing is instead of just holding one of the shoulder buttons down and then pressing a button, he's actually got combos now where it's sensing if he's got L1 and R1 click down at the same time and then a button, it will produce another sound again. So you can really expand on this sort of stuff and make it do pretty much whatever you want it to do. So it's a great little system. Let me just have a very quick look at my notes. So we've talked about failsafe, we talked about libraries, and servos. The other thing that is something that you need to bear in mind, and I've had a chat with one of the UK inspectors, the MOT inspectors, about this, a guy called Darren Paulson, who I'm sure a lot of you know, is about fuses. Dimension Engineering, who make the Sabertooth and Siren 10 speed controllers, recommend that you do not put a fuse in between your power source and the actual boards themselves. Now, it's not something personally I felt particularly comfortable with. So on my own droid, I have actually got fuses in line. They're pretty hefty. I think they're, I've got like a 40 amp fuse in the drive, and I think it's about a 10 amp fuse in the dome controller. But having fuses is not a requirement for your speed controllers according for tier 1 or tier 2 clearance. There is a recommendation that the rest of your board is protected by fuses. So if you're running your Arduino, for example, and your SparkFun at 12 volts, then the recommendation is you have a fuse. Personally, I vary between builds, what I've done. Some of them I've been running the whole lot at 12 volts. This particular one here that you've just seen demoed is actually taking a 5 volt output for the which way around it goes. So on the Sabertooth 32, the Sabertooth and the Siren have both got 5 volt outputs as well, which are very, very handy to use. They're nice, clean, regulated outputs. So I've got the 5 volts coming from out of the Sabertooth and into the MP3 player. And the Arduino is actually being powered by the Siren 10. So that the Arduino is running also a 5 volt feed directly off the Siren 10. So effectively, there's no requirement for fuses on this particular build whatsoever. So that's something also to just bear in mind. If you're thinking about going for tier 2 clearance, so it's going to be used by the likes of Disney or on a red carpet event or whatever else, then this is not the system for you. This is a system that's great for using around sort of convention centers or schools or hospitals and those sorts of things, but not on a film set where you've got 310 different devices all vying for the same same 2.4 gig network connectivity, because the amount of noise potentially could overpower it. Not saying we've ever actually seen that happen, but it just doesn't happen at the moment because you are required to have traditional RC for tier 2, as I mentioned earlier. Right, I'm conscious that I've been waffling on a lot and try to cover an awful lot in a very, very short space of time. That was pretty good, 25 minutes odd. That's a record, I think, for me. So I'm just gonna grab a mouthful of drink, and Michael, if it's okay with you, we'll open up to questions.
No, thanks, Steve. That was great. Yeah, good overview. But again, open the floor. Any questions or anything specifically want to ask around the Padawan, David?
You can use this PlayStation controller, correct? Also, besides the Xbox.
Not with this system, as I mentioned. I don't know. Maybe you mentioned. No, if you may have missed it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The reason for that, David, is that this particular sketch is written using the Xbox libraries. So it's expecting Xbox commands, and a PlayStation won't be pushing out Xbox commands. However, there is a system that does that called Shadow. So you may instead wish to be looking for the Shadow system. Now, one of the reasons why the Padawan 360 sketch came along in the first place was that PS2 controllers, which is what Shadow was originally based on, started getting a little bit more scarce and hard to come by, and they started sort of failing et cetera. But there are variants, other sort of variants for control, as I say, Shadow and different things like that. I think there was Shadow F, I think it originally started as, which is PlayStation based as opposed to Xbox based.
All right, thank you. I was just curious.
Well, I mean, they are separate component parts. So you know, if you pretty much you could do it with anything, but you'd have to rewrite the code, change the interfaces, upload libraries, etc., etc. But
it's a bit like saying, can I put diesel in my petrol car? The two are just incompatible.
Yeah.
If you change the engine, of course you can.
There you go. So to take that analogy to that degree, then Michael's just hit the nail right on the head. Yeah.
Steve, if I wanted to do some more advanced work with servos and sounds and hollow projectors and so on and so forth, could I put an Arduino in the top end and have everything below the dome?
Yeah. So really what you want to do for that sort of thing is you're going to be looking at the mega version of the sketch, the Arduino mega version. Again, I did touch on this very briefly, but the Arduino Uno has got very limited functionality for talking to other devices over serial. So if you're trying to talk to another Arduino, so the Arduino stuff, for example, up in Tease's lights or something like that, then yeah, you're going to be using something called I2C or I2C, some people call it. And that is very limited because you're already using the serial connection on the Arduino Uno to talk to your smartphone MP3 board. So you basically run out of connections. So yeah, you're going to be looking at something like the Mega Sketch. So yeah, it's entirely possible, but it's a little bit outside the realms of this particular Zoom chat.
So there's no reason they couldn't run as independent systems. Seriously, one to run everything below the dome and one to run everything above it.
Oh yeah, if you want to run them independently, totally. Sure. Personally, on my Android, that's exactly what I do. My dome is completely independent of the bottom.
R2 touch.
No, on mine it's just automated. Basically, just runs all the Tease's lights and whatever else. I don't have servos. Sorry, I should have perhaps cleared that out. I don't use servos and things in my personal dome. But my personal dome runs off its own battery pack, so I can literally lift the dome off and it will carry on twitching the hollow projector. I wrote a very, very simple little Arduino sketch, and it runs a little Arduino Nano. Power to the servos comes directly off a 5-volt battery, and which also powers the Nano, and the Nano basically tells the pair of servos randomly at sort of XY coordinates, move like this, and then move like that, and then move like this, and it'll basically then, through like a natural pivoting action on the back of the hollow projector, it just wiggles, just sort of moves the hollow projector to look in different positions randomly every, I don't know, I think I said it's between 5 and 8 seconds or something. But if anyone wants that sketch, just feel free to ask and I'll post it somewhere. I'll speak to Michael and we'll get it posted up. But it's literally sort of like 10 lines long. It's incredibly simple.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I think once you get used to again, it's worth reading through the code, but once you get, it's fairly easy to configure. I mean, I think as most people do when you first start with the Padawan, what you do is you put all the wires together, you kind of say a couple of prayers, you plug it in, you cross your fingers and toes, and then when you hear a noise, it's like, oh my God, it works. I'm never touching it again. But then when you start to read through the code, it's actually quite English. And I started just putting a couple of servos on and just getting them to move off a single press of a button, and it was magic when I did that. And then suddenly you can pretty much have anything to it. But by default, the code's not in there. It's more around learning some of the basics around Arduino and sort of extending it.
And hopefully, if you can see the graphic I've just put up, the actual connectivity and wiring for basic Padawan 360 is about as simple as you can possibly get. There's really very, very little to it. People kind of get quite scared if they're not familiar with these sorts of things. Yeah, they worry about how complex this is actually going to be. But literally, you've got 3 yellow data wires. So you've got one talking to your dome motor, one talking to your MP3 player, one talking to your motor controller. Common grounds everywhere, so everything's all on the same ground. Power going to everything, and you can either, as I say, use 12-volt power straight to your MP3 player, so long as you flick a switch into the right place. I've done some videos about all this stuff as well, so a little sort of plug there. If you want to sort of revisit anything to do with building a basic Padawan 360 system, have a look on YouTube. I've got a 3-part video series where I built a Padawan 360 basically from scratch to operational, and just search for something like Padawan 360 UK R2 or R2 builders or R2D2 or something like that. I can't remember, but you should find it pretty quickly.
I can stick a link up. Cool.
Have we got any other questions?
Hey, Steve. What's required to, I mean, I'm not nowhere near tier 2 stuff. What will be required for tier 2 besides an RC controller? What other type of certification do you need?
Right, I didn't quite catch all of that. Were you saying what other control systems are available?
What's required for tier 2, Steve? I think in addition to the RC controller, if that's right. Is that right, Andrew?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, tier 2 is traditional remote control. So so you're going to be using something like, as I say, a Spectrum or Futaba remote control system. I think Lee uses a Spectrum DX7 off the top of my head. I might be wrong on that. But something like a traditional radio control system. Now, to get that talking to your speed controllers, yeah, your Siren and your Sabertooth. In fact, I'd need to double check on that, but the Sabertooth you can program to be accepting a remote control input. So it's expecting PWM as opposed to data. So what we're using on the Arduino is serial data. What you can put the Sabertooth 32 mode into is also remote control. So you can actually have it just purely as a remote control sensing mode. So you basically have a wire, the data wire, what would be the data wire or the PWM wire coming out of whichever channel it is. So if you're using like tank steering, for example, then you basically just have that going from your receiver into your Sabertooth. I can't really give you too much more information on that because I've never actually built one. Say I've come from an RC background, but I've never built a radio control system for an R2 in that way. Now my 39.1% egg droid actually does use RC, funny enough. And yeah, so it actually just uses a very, very simple little speed controller, which has one connection into your radio receiver. And then that mixes out the DC commands. It's not Sabertooth because that would be massively overkill for a project of that sort of size. But yeah, you can definitely do it. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question right at the moment. However, if you do want more reading information and more sort of material on that, Rob Howdell did he put together a PDF document, I think, of basically showing you all the different options for controlling a droid. So it's got shadow in there.
I was just saying it's a great document, Steve.
Oh, great! I thought you said it's very dark. I was like, is it really? I actually thought it was quite light-hearted myself, but
no, it's a great document.
Yeah. So yeah, I would recommend going and have a look at Rob's document. He did a great job of putting all that sort of information together. So that could be very helpful.
There's a bunch of other stuff on tier 2, which is more around the accuracy of the build. So it's making sure that the weathering and everything is absolutely spot on. So in the UK, I think we had one tier 2 droid. That was it.
Yeah,
and then
for
we had a couple.
quite a while we had just one. Yeah.
Now I think we've got about 3, but it's it's a really hard standard to get to because it is used for official Disney events, etc.
What kind of wiring do you suggest? Like what thickness and what kind of connectors? Because I tried to do the original Padawan and stuff or Shadow, excuse me. Well, the PS2 and couldn't get it work out, but figuring out wiring and all of that so that parts wouldn't be falling apart.
Yeah, that's a great question, Anna. Now the slightly sort of dubious answer is depends. So it kind of depends a little bit on your actual build. If you've got a lightweight build like a styrene droid, for example, and you're not going to be having to draw too many amps, then you can kind of get away with thinner wires. But basically, I wouldn't recommend anything less than 14 AWG for your motors. As far as wires sort of interconnecting for data wires and things like that, then just bog standard crimp wire, DuPont connector sort of stuff. That's more than good enough because all you're doing is sending data down them. In terms of the wire going to your speed controllers, again, I wouldn't personally recommend you drop anything smaller than 14 AWG. Now, just to explain for people again who may be new to this, how AWG works, the lower the number, the thicker the wire.
Thicker the wire.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so 12 would be thicker gauge than 14. 10 would be thicker gauge again than 12, etc., etc. So yeah, I wouldn't really go anything north of like 14 or maybe 16, but I personally wouldn't use 16. I'd use I think my Android is 12 because I happen to have some Silicon 12 kicking around. This particular build I've just been demoing tonight is using 14.
Do you use like the single wire copper or the stereo speaker wire? Like, do you have is there a preferences or as
I use single wires.
Okay.
I mean, if you can get something like 14 as a pair, then great. But I don't recall seeing 14 AWG as a paired sort of wire. Now, if you are talking about things like
she was asking stranded versus solid core.
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, stranded, definitely stranded.
Stranded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, the
for sure.
flexibility, you definitely want that. You will get a little bit more current handling with a solid core than you will with the stranded, but for what we're using it for, the difference is negligible.
Okay.
Yeah, you potentially, depending on how you crimp the ends, and if you just sort of wrap it, if your preference is to wrap it around the terminals and screw them tight down, you're going to get a much better connection using multi-strand, I would suggest, than solid copper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I say that the flexibility of being able to kind of run around corners and things like that with a stranded wire is going to be, I think, much more benefit than solid copper.
Cool. Any more questions? We're all experts now.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah, go for it.
When will the video be? The recording link be available? Will you put it on your Facebook?
Sorry, will this one be available?
Yeah, the recording link. When would that be available?
Pretty much. We should be able to get it out tomorrow, I would hope. I've not recorded a Zoom session before, so I'm hoping it's fairly straightforward. So I'll get it downloaded hopefully today, and then get it onto YouTube and get some links out.
Also, Andrew, if it's useful to you, I did that presentation, as I mentioned at the top of today's chat. I actually did this presentation in full, and also a demo of the drive sort utility at last year's UK R2 Builders Meet, which Michael very kindly videoed the whole thing of me standing on in front of everyone trying to talk rubbish for an hour or so, which I think I've just about managed. So Michael's actually got a video already made of pretty much what I've just told you. So if you have a look through Michael's YouTube channel, there will be a video there somewhere. Again, if you just search for Padawan 360, but on Michael's YouTube channel, again, you should find the that particular chat. Just look for the guy with the shiny head.
Yeah, I try to get as much of the videos up there and I'll do the same with this one. Cool.
I do have a quick question. Does there happen to be a Mac version of that drive sort or some program that's similar?
Short answer, don't know.
Okay.
No,
not a Mac person. How Mac writes its files to an external drive potentially could be different. It may be a non-issue. I honestly don't know.
Right. Because I know in the past, like trying to pull stuff off of that SparkFun board and upload it again, it can be a pain.
Oh, I can
yeah, for sure. It's something that if you don't know about it, you'll be scratching your head for ages, thinking, "What the hell have I done wrong? Why? Since I put a new Princess Leia message because I found a better copy of it, why are all the other files now not making the sounds I'm expecting them to make?" And where it really does your noodle in is like the first time you switch your droid back on after doing it, the confirmation sounds that you will get used to. So when your controller connects, it'll kind of give you a chirp. That's going to play a different sound because it's now calling that file was like number 26 and it's now number 25 because everything's shuffled out by one. So it starts playing the wrong sounds to you that you would expect. And that can really severely mess with your head.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the only other thing I could think of is do you level out your audio before uploading it onto the SparkFun board?
Yeah, I've got a pretty good set of files that have been used by a number of builders around. And in fact, I don't know if you were quick enough to spot it, but on the particular example I used, it happened to be in a folder called Sam's R2, and you can probably guess who that's referring to. So these files here are actually what were loaded onto Mr. Prentice's R2. I did his sound files for him.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Cool. Any more questions?
Just give me sort of a rundown. If something doesn't work when you try to plug it in and you don't get the sounds or you don't get the thing, what's your general troubleshooting procedure? Like,
sure.
What do you
Okay.
try to do?
Great question. So are you saying that the sketch is already loaded onto your Arduino?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not just specific to this unit. Just sort of give me an idea of what your process is.
Sure. Okay. First thing is obviously, with any kind of computing problem, check the physical. So check everything is plugged in where it's supposed to be plugged in. Don't assume that just because it's plugged into a particular pin on your Arduino, for example, that it's in the right one. Another common thing, mistake for one of it. I'm trying to not use the word mistake, but I'll say mistake that people make is that on an Arduino Uno, the first pin is not pin 1, it's pin 0. So it starts at 0. So if your sketch says plug your first pin into pin 5, it's actually the 6th one in, if you see what I mean. So always, so to answer your question, first thing, always start at the physical. Check everything is connected. Check you've got continuity through. If you've got a voltmeter, or if you haven't, go and buy yourself a cheap voltmeter. It will save you hours and hours and hours of frustration, because even if you buy an off-the-shelf DuPont wire, I've had numerous times where the things are just faulty. So I tend to make my own these days. Michael put me on to the crimp tools and crimping, and now I'm an absolute crimpaholic. So I think we should set up Crimpaholics Anonymous for people like us now who crimp everything. So check the physical. Then you can sort of start diagnosing what's going on. So say, for example, your sounds aren't working. First thing you're going to do is check the SparkFun board. When you tell it to make a sound, is the little green LED coming on? Because every time it plays a sound, it also lights up a little green LED on the board. If the LED is coming on, but you're still not getting sounds, then your problem is downstream of that. So it's either the output, it could be your cable going from your MP3 board to your amplifier. Now, the other thing, actually, I didn't mention, I've got one kicking around somewhere, that I use on all the builds I make for people is because I also supply them with an amplifier, and that amplifier is also being powered through the same 12-volt system. You can get buzz. You can pick up a buzzing sound. So what I do is I put something called a ground loop isolator in line. And what a ground loop isolator does, it looks a bit like a black sort of barrel connector. I have actually got one here. I had to sort of hurriedly shove everything to one side just before. Where's it gone? There it is. One of these. This is a ground loop isolator. Now these come in a variety of sorts. I would recommend you get one of these thick round ones. Okay, as you can see, it's probably the thickness of 2 fingers or so. These are fantastic. They're absolutely great. And I have come across builders who have bought sort of cheapish oblong shaped ones, and they still get buzz problems. And they're sort of saying to me, "Oh, it's buzzing," and I say, "Well, how's your ground loop isolator?" And they show me, and I say, "Right, well, there's your problem right there. They spent like $2 on it. You want to be spending sort of like $10 worth on a decent ground loop isolator. That will cut all noise and buzz straight away." So yeah, start at the physical. Always start at the physical. Doesn't matter, if you're talking about Padawan 360 or if you're talking about your TV not working. Start at the physical. Check everything is plugged in where it's supposed to be. Make sure no wires have come loose or chafed, disconnected, etc., etc. And then it's a case of just working through logically. I'm kind of fortunate that I've got a very logical pathway sort of frame of working. So I find it quite easy to follow a path, and you'll always end up with whatever it is that's broken or not working. Did that answer the question you were asking, Anna?
Yeah, I think no, that's exactly what I wanted, because that gives me just a general nice work through to problem solve. So thank you.
Yep, no problem. Pleasure.
Excellent. Okay.
Any others?
No. Brilliant. Well, just a big thanks, guys, for coming along. I mean, we'll do a round of applause for Steve, I think. Oh, thank you so much, Steve.
Too kind.
And we'll just do a few of these drop-ins, really, just talking about different builds. As I said, we can do build-specific DOs or BD1s and some of the R2s, just so people can ask questions and delve into them a little bit more. Fantastic.
If anyone's got anything they want to sort of message me about directly, if they want me to run through anything, give me a shout. I'm on all of the forums. Baudains on astromech.net and astromech.info. I'm obviously on Michael's 3D printers page, Steve Baudains, on the UK R2 builders page as well. Otherwise, ping me a friend request and just mention it's from, on something to do with an R2, and I'll help you out as best as I can. Please, I will plug my business one little time if Michael doesn't mind. Please go and search for Imperial Light and Magic, especially during these weird times. That is my business, and that's what's keeping me afloat at the moment. So go and have a search for Imperial Light and Magic. I do build Padawan systems for people. I don't tend to advertise that because it's not something I really kind of want to get into, because frankly, I don't charge people enough to kind of really make a profit on it, if you see what I mean. Because the parts, as one of the things that puts a lot of people off about this, and as I mentioned earlier, is the parts are expensive. The saber tooth, it's expensive. The Spark for an MP3 player, for what it is crazy expensive. I mean, it's like $30-40, but I can buy a similar functional MP3 board for about $1 or $2. But it would require a complete rewrite of the code. Frankly, I'd rather spend £30 on a new board than spend £30 worth of time fighting through the code, and then it's unsupported. So if Dan released another version of the code that fixed some other issues or develops other functionality, that's it. I'd have to scrap it and start again. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for standardization, and that's why the system is pretty damn good at what it does.
Oh, cool. Right, thanks, Steve.
Pays your money, takes your choice.
All right, and remember, next Saturday it is the monumental third part of Drinks and Droids. So
can't wait.
If we all get ourselves stocked up. I did mention it on the chat today. The UK guys had a UK one, and they did 8 hours straight through. 8 hours, which is
8 hours. That's a lot of red stack.
That's not all of them. There was 4 of them, I think, towards the end.
We went to bed about 3:15.
No.
Yeah.
I dipped
Yeah,
out at
but
quarter to 1.
the only reason we don't go that long there, Michael, is because you keep turning it off. We were like 10 hours last weekend.
I can see it going down the gauntlet there, Brian.
Yeah, we figured out how the host can hand over control to someone else, Michael. So no pressure, but if you feel like dipping out, just hand the control over to someone else next weekend.
I did realise that when I saw it. I thought, bloody hell, I wish we'd done that actually. So that's a good shout.
We can bounce it all the way to the west coast of the U.S. So we
just follow it
around
around.
4 hours here.
Do you know? Honestly, we're going to do that. We're going to do it. We're going to do. Let's see how long we can keep this running across the world. We start off in the UK. We can hand it over to the guys in the US. You can hand it over to the Australians.
On May
By the time the UK wake up,
May the 4th. There you go. 24-hour marathon. May the 4th.
Exactly. Let's find a proper charity and turn it into a reason to give some money.
No, that's a great idea, that, Rick.
Good shout.
And we can stack beer cans at the side of our bed, Steve, for the UK. So when we wake up, we can start straight. They have to take over from the Australians.
Is that how a Jamaican person says bacon?
I'll clock in, and that must be a good charity.
Yeah, no, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the guys in the US, but the UK does have specified charities that we support already. So maybe it'd be a good idea to sort of pool all our resources and split the donations 50-50 or something.
A marathon would be a heck of an idea. Love it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas jumpers next weekend, though.
Christmas jumpers next weekend, apparently, as well.
That's because you started it, Mike.
Yeah. It's the 25th next weekend, next Saturday. So Mike's decided that we're going to be wearing Christmas jumpers, especially because he looks like Santa at the moment.
It's Corona Christmas. Corona Christmas next Saturday.
Corona Christmas next Saturday. Oh my God, you guys are lunatics.
Hell yeah.
Well done, Steve. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, that was great, Steve.
An absolute pleasure. More than happy to give something back to the community because it's given me so much.
Cool. Anyway, good day, good night, and see you all next Saturday for our Christmas marathon. Let's go. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.